Sunday school.
I don't want to go anymore.
Hot chocolate.
I don't want to go.
Caitlin.
Chocolate and donuts.
Still don't want to.
Caitlin, your father already explained to you you can't come into church with us, okay? Kids' church will be much more fun.
I don't want to go.
She's afraid.
I'm not.
You're such a baby, Caitlin.
Nobody asked you.
Jarrett, you're not helping any. Come on, this is new for all of
It's
us.
enough out of both of you. Moving to a new town, going to a new church, it's a lot of changes, I know, but there's nothing to be frightened of, okay? And Jarrett, take your sister to class, Alexis, and we'll meet you right here afterwards.
Goodness gracious, is that you, Mr. Henry?
Yeah. Oh, hello, Mrs. Strickland. How in the world are you? I didn't hear you coming in.
What on earth are you doing?
I am preparing to be a Roman soldier.
I never... Oh, you're not going to do anything crazy with those children, are you, Mr. Henry? I heard from Mrs. Ferguson that her fourth graders got soaking wet when you substituted for her at her church. Where you got that much water from, I have no idea.
Hey, now, don't you worry. I have been here since 6 o'clock this morning, aimlessly wandering about, looking for just the right details. I've got everything put together just exactly the way it ought to be. Nothing can go wrong. Hardly anything.
You didn't have to go through so much trouble. I'm sure the lesson plan didn't call for all this business. Lord have mercy. Oh, I hope that's not your fourth graders, Mr. Henry. Now, children, I guess we can see the trouble that can happen when we disobey the rules. And Tyson, I'm sure you won't bring your football to kids' church any longer. I don't know what you were thinking. Many of you are aware that your regular teacher, Miss Ramirez, is feeling under the weather. So we've had to ask a substitute teacher to come in for her.
Mr. Henry!
Mr. Henry? Mr. Henry? Do you really think Mr. Henry's coming?
I hope so. I heard he's real cool.
Mr. Henry? Mr. Henry?
Greetings and felicitations.
It is Mr. Henry!
I told you so.
Oh, mercy! Oh! Oh, my.
Yeah! Mr. Henry! Mr. Henry! Mr. Henry!
I guess you're all happy to see Mr. Henry. Oh, and everyone, make sure that, Caitlin, the new girl, feels welcome. Oh.
Hello, Caitlin.
Now, children, you do whatever Mr. Henry tells you to do. Unless it has something to do with water.
Now, have any of you ever been frightened to go to kids' church?
What's scary about church?
Well, you know, in the early days of the church, Christians were thrown into prison for believing in Jesus.
Yeah, but not kids.
Well, hey, back in the old days, there were Roman soldiers dressed just like me, who took kids just like you and threw them into prison. They'd take the kids into prison. Sometimes they'd let the moms and the dads go. The Roman officials were hoping that the moms and the dads would give up their faith and deny Christ just to get their sons and their daughters back.
That's terrible.
Yeah. But even today, in some parts of the world, Christians, even children, are still being thrown into prison for their faith. So, there have been times, and there are places, where going to church can be a very frightening thing. Now, I thought, to prove my point, we're going to pretend that I am a Roman soldier, and that you are innocent Christians, and I'm going to arrest you and drag you off into prison. No, really, I am. No, I really... I'm Ah, Christians are you? Churchgoers are you? Believers in Jesus Christ are you? That is against the law of the Empire. Off with you! On your feet! 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, step lively, look alive!
Where are we going?
Well, we're going to the basement.
What's in the basement?
Well, Roman prisoners are not allowed to ask questions. Why aren't you moving? Go, 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 go! Don't worry, it'll be fine. Step lively, step lively.
Are there bugs in here?
Oh, I wouldn't worry about the bugs. I'm sure they've all been eaten by the spiders.
Spiders?
If you had been arrested by the Romans, they would have probably beaten you with rods and then flogged you with a whip like this. Then they would have thrown you into a deep, dark, dank cell. The bars wouldn't have been of bamboo, you know. They would have been of iron. It would have been colder. It would have been darker and wetter and full of rats and no sinks, no showers, no toilettes. It would have smelled real bad.
I'd try to escape.
That's one idea. Of course, if you were caught and apprehended, you would be executed. But listen, God knows where you are, even when you're in a dark and lonely place. He knows exactly what you need, and he'll deliver you out of tough times. You don't believe me? You don't think he can do it?
How could God get someone out of real prison?
Hey, funny you should ask. Well, let's check the older history book. History of the early church, we call it the Book of Acts. You know, old Herod. He decided he wanted to please the religious leaders, and so he had Peter thrown into prison. That was during the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Okay, Acts chapter 12, verse 4. After arresting him, he put him in prison, handing him over to be guarded by 4 squads of 4 soldiers each. Herod intended to bring him out for public trial after the Passover. So Peter was kept in prison, but the church was earnestly praying to God for him. The night before Herod was to bring him to trial, Peter was sleeping between 2 soldiers, bound with 2 chains, and sentries stood guard at the entrance. Suddenly, an angel of the Lord appeared, and a light shone in the cell. He struck Peter on the side and woke him up.
Quick, get up.
He said, and the chains fell off Peter's wrists. Then the angel said to him,
Put on your clothes and sandals.
and Peter did so.
Wrap your cloak around you and follow me.
The angel told him. Peter followed him out of the prison, but he had no idea that what the angel was doing was really happening. He thought he was seeing a vision. They passed the first and second guards and came to the iron gate leading to the city. It opened for them by itself, and they went through it. When they had walked the length of one street, suddenly the angel left him. He went to the house of Mary, the mother of John, also called Mark, where many people had gathered and were praying. Peter knocked at the outer entrance, and a servant girl named Rhoda came to answer the door. When she recognized Peter's voice, she was so overjoyed, she ran back without opening it and exclaimed,
Peter is at the door.
You're out of your mind.
They told her. When she kept insisting that it was so, they said,
It must be his angel.
But Peter kept on knocking. And when they opened the door and saw him, they were astonished. Peter motioned with his hand for them to be quiet and described how the Lord had brought him out of prison.
Tell James and the brothers about this,
He said, and then he left for another place. In the morning, there was no small commotion among the soldiers as to what had become of Peter. After Herod had a thorough search made for him and did not find him, he cross-examined the guards and ordered that they be executed. Then Herod went from Judea to Caesarea and stayed there a while. It was nice to get him out of town.
That was cool.
I'd want an angel to come help me get away, too.
Sometimes God uses angels, and sometimes God uses natural forces.
What kind of natural forces?
Well, how about an earthquake?
That would be scary.
Oh, but just remember, it doesn't matter where you are. God's always right there with you, and He's got a plan. He's got a program. He knows what He's going on. He can deliver you through the tough times. Well, the Apostle Paul and his friend Silas, they were preaching in Philippi, and they got arrested, and they got beaten, and they got thrown into prison, and the jailer took them down into the deep, dark recesses of the prison, and he put their legs in irons like these. Let me read it to you. Acts chapter 16. Once, when we were going to the place of prayer, we were met by a slave girl who had a spirit by which she predicted the future. She earned a great deal of money for her owners by fortune-telling. This girl followed Paul and the rest of us, shouting,
"These men are servants of the Most High God who are telling you the way to be saved."
She kept this up for many days. Finally, Paul became so troubled that he turned around and said to the spirit,
"In the name of Jesus Christ, I command you to come out of her."
At that moment, the spirit left her. When the owners of the slave girl realized that their hope of making money was gone, they seized Paul and Silas and dragged them into the marketplace to face the authorities. They brought them before the magistrates and said,
"These men are Jews and are throwing our city into an uproar by advocating customs unlawful for us Romans to accept or practice."
The crowd joined in the attack against Paul and Silas, and the magistrates ordered them to be stripped and beaten. After they'd been severely flogged, they were thrown into prison, and the jailer was commanded to guard them carefully. Upon receiving such orders, he put them in the inner cell and fastened their feet in the stocks. About midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God, and the other prisoners were listening to them. Suddenly, there was such a violent earthquake that the foundations of the prison were shaken. At once, all the prison doors flew open, and everybody's chains came loose. The jailer woke up.
And when he saw the prison doors open, he drew his sword and was about to kill himself because he thought the prisoners had escaped. But Paul shouted,
Do not harm yourself. We are all here.
The jailer called for lights, rushed in, and fell trembling before Paul and Silas. He then brought them out and asked,
Sirs, what must I do to be saved?
They replied,
Believe in the Lord Jesus and you'll be saved. You and your household.
Then they spoke the word of the Lord to him and to all the others in his house. At that hour of the night, the jailer took them and washed their wounds. Then immediately, he and all his family were baptized. The jailer brought them into his house and set a meal before them. He was filled with joy because he had come to believe in God, he and his whole family. When it was daylight, the magistrates sent their officers to the jailer with the order,
Release those men.
The jailer told Paul,
The magistrates have ordered that you and Silas be released. Now you can leave. Go in peace.
But Paul said to the officers,
They beat us publicly without a trial, even though we are Roman citizens, and threw us into prison. And now, do they want to get rid of us quietly? No! Let them come themselves and escort us out.
The officers reported this to the magistrates, and when they heard that Paul and Silas were Roman citizens, they were alarmed. They came to appease them and escorted them from the prison, requesting them to leave the city. After Paul and Silas came out of the prison, they went to Lydia's house, where they met with the brothers and encouraged them. Then they left. You know, if God can deliver Paul and Silas, he can deliver us too. He may not use an angel or an earthquake, but he cares enough about us that he will show up and he'll give you exactly what you need. He loves you, and he'll give you what you need to get through those hard times.
So, I guess they knew better than to throw Paul in prison again.
Well, you'd think so, wouldn't you? But a few years later, Paul went to Jerusalem, and this huge riot broke out because there were a bunch of people in Jerusalem who wanted him killed. So the Romans arrested him again, and they threw him in prison again. Of course, you remember Paul was a Roman citizen, which meant that if he didn't think he could get a fair trial in Judea, he could always appeal to Caesar in Rome. And that's just what he did. Now, who can tell me what this thing is?
It's a rock.
That's a real good guess. But what do you suppose they used it for in Roman times?
I know. It's a stone for grinding wheat.
I don't think they used it for domestic purposes. Keep going.
Is it a stone that they would put in a catapult?
You're gonna throw this thing in a catapult? It didn't fly through the air. I don't think it even did anything on the land.
Then, was it used in the water?
You're getting a little closer, closer.
Was it on a ship?
Yeah, you're scaring me now.
It was an anchor.
You're right. Very good.
I never would have guessed that.
Yeah, well, if Paul was going to get to Rome from Judea to stand trial, he'd have to take a sailing ship, and, oh, that was a long, slow trip. And the weather started out okay, but it got real bad after that. harrowing voyage. Acts 27. When a gentle south wind began to blow, they thought they had obtained what they wanted, so they weighed anchor and sailed along the shore of Crete. Before very long, a wind of hurricane force called the Northeaster swept down from the island. The ship was caught by the storm and could not head into the wind, so we gave way to it and were driven along. As we passed to the lee of a small island called Cauda, we were hardly able to make the lifeboat secure. When the men had hoisted it aboard, they passed ropes under the ship itself to hold it together. Fearing that they would run aground on the sandbars of Syrtis, they lowered the sea anchor and let the ship be driven along. We took such a violent battering from the storm that the next day they began to throw the cargo overboard. On the third day, they threw the ship's tackle overboard with their own hands. When neither sun nor stars appeared for many days and the storm continued raging, we finally gave up all hope of being saved. After the men had gone a long time without food, Paul stood up before them and said,
Men, you should have taken my advice not to sail from Crete. Then you would have spared yourselves this damage and loss. But now I urge you to keep up your courage, because not one of you will be lost. Only the ship will be destroyed. Last night, an angel of the God whose I am and whom I serve stood beside me and said, "Do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand trial before Caesar. And God has graciously given you the lives of all who sail with you. So, keep up your courage, men, for I have faith in God that it will happen just as he told me. Nevertheless, we must run aground on some island."
On the 14th night, we were still being driven across the Adriatic Sea when about midnight, the sailors sensed they were approaching land. They took soundings and found that the water was 120 feet deep. A short time later, they took soundings again and found it was 90 feet deep. Fearing that we would be dashed against the rocks, they dropped 4 anchors from the stern and prayed for daylight. In an attempt to escape from the ship, the sailors let the lifeboat down into the sea, pretending they were going to lower some anchors from the bow. Then Paul said to the centurion and the soldiers,
"Unless those men stay with the ship, you cannot be saved."
So the soldiers cut the ropes that held the lifeboat and let it fall away. Just before dawn, Paul urged them all to eat.
For the last 14 days,
he said,
you have been in constant suspense and have gone without food. You haven't eaten anything. Now, I urge you to take some food. You need it to survive. Not one of you will lose a single hair from his head.
After he said this, he took some bread and gave thanks to God in front of them all. Then he broke it and began to eat. They were all encouraged and ate some food themselves. Altogether, there were 276 of us on board. When they had eaten as much as they wanted, they lightened the ship by throwing the grain into the sea. When daylight came, they did not recognize the land, but they saw a bay with a sandy beach where they decided to run the ship aground if they could. Cutting loose the anchors, they left them in the sea and at the same time untied the ropes that held the rudders. Then they hoisted the foresail to the wind and made for the beach. But the ship struck a sandbar and ran aground. The bow stuck fast and would not move, and the stern was broken to pieces by the pounding of the surf. The soldiers planned to kill the prisoners to prevent any of them from swimming away and escaping, but the centurion wanted to spare Paul's life and kept them from carrying out their plan. He ordered those who could swim to jump overboard first and get to land. The rest were to get there on planks or on pieces of the ship. In this way, everyone reached land in safety. So, you see, no matter where you are, no matter how frightened and lonely you may feel, God is right there with you every time. He loves you. He's going to look out for you. You know, He may not send an angel. He may not send an earthquake. He may not send a plank of wood, but He's there with you. And He'll always watch over you, because you know what? He loves you, each and every one of you. He'll watch after you. That's the promise He's made to each and every one of us.
Oh, my! What have you done with the children? Mr. Henry, you didn't have to do this.
Oh, yes, Mrs. Strickland.
I mean, if they were bothering you, you could have called me. I mean, to put them in here. Oh.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. We've had a wonderful time. It's been great. They've been great.
What are your parents going to say?
Bye, Mr. Henry. We had a great time, Mrs. Strickland.
Thank you, Mr. Henry.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Bye, Mr. Henry. Oh, Mrs. Strickland, it was so cool. God sent an angel and an earthquake to get people out of jail. Paul even got shipwrecked, but God saved him.
A shipwreck? Oh, my.
Hey, Jared. The youth group ski trip sounds like fun.
I don't know. Never been skiing before.
Well, look, lessons for beginners. Hey, kiddo.
Lessons are stupid.
Jared, we had this great lesson today. We learned that God will protect us no matter where we are. He loves us, and He'll always look out for us.
How do you know that?
It's all in the Bible.
It's right here.